Hello and welcome to Paranormal Tales from Truck Drivers. A few days ago I was reading over my comments from last week's video about phantom dogs and I saw an interesting trend popping up. Two of my viewers mentioned how phantom dogs were also something that was based on lore within the truck driving profession. Due to these comments, they inadvertently gave me the idea for the really interesting topic that is the subject of today's video. It then sent me down the rabbit hole of what other paranormal stories do truck drivers have. So I wish to extend a huge thank you to Yoko Karama62 and Kyle Maurice for bringing me a paranormal topic that few people seem to talk about. I normally don't do this, but I also wanted to take a moment to extend my concerns for everyone during this time of the COVID-19 outbreak. While I have mixed feelings about it, I still hope that everyone is staying safe and all is well with your family and friends. I personally have received so many messages from my fans worrying about my well-being as well as my family's. I am happy to report that all of us are fine and, so far, free of infection. My heart goes out to each and every one of you, and I look forward to everyone getting through this and all of us returning to a normal life. With all that said, let's move on to a topic that is a little bit lighter, which is the paranormal tales of truck drivers. Starting off, I must admit that a lot of these stories come from internet sources, since finding books about this topic is nigh impossible. In saying that, I try to find stories that were real encounters, rather than ones that were simply ghost stories told around the campfire. With that said, I can only go off of people's encounters, so I guess what I'm trying to get at is take the following with a grain of salt. I wanted to begin our tales with the story that started the whole idea for this video, and that is phantom dog sightings. Much like the topic of last week's video, the story is about modern day truck drivers coming across a large black dog while traveling down the open road. Now this creature can be seen as if it were a real flesh and blood animal, or it can be spotted in a more wispy ethereal form. Some of the stories say they look rather normal, albeit large, but others have added the feature of them having glowing red eyes. With their encounters, it also differs by story on how the being is seen. In the vast majority of the tales, the dog is seen running straight at the truck and either vanishes before impact, or it leaves the driver wondering if they actually run over some animal. In these cases, the dog is never found, leaving one to realize it must have been a ghost. As you can tell with this, there really isn't any agreement as to how things look, act, or even what their true purpose is. In some retellings, this phantom is seen as a warning that there is some type of danger up the road, while others state that the dog represents an omen and that the driver will die soon. Viewer Yoko Karama62 wrote me an account about a story involving their dad, who was a truck driver. It is said that their dad saw a black dog cross the road in front of his truck just before a blind turn. Knowing the tales, or just possibly to avoid running over an animal, he slowed down. As he came around the turn at a slower speed, he saw that a car was broke down in his lane and there were kids inside. Had he not slowed down because of the dog, the story could have ended with tragedy. I saw plenty of stories like this while looking into the topic, but yet there were others saying drivers tried to swerve to miss the dog and ended up wrecking their truck. I must note that this story is normally considered an urban legend, but in doing a little bit of research, I found that many truckers, both newbie and veteran, have stated that this is a real thing. While many may rule this out as just some modern day folktale, it is worth mentioning that many see this as being very real, but with a possible rational explanation. One truck driver stated that he saw this dog as well, but it was more ethereal in form. Rather than saying it was a ghost, he stated it looked more like the floaters you can see in your eye, and he thinks this, tied with lack of sleep, could be the culprit behind the phantom dog sightings. Quite a few of the tales state that the dog shows up only when a driver is tired, and many deduce it is time to pull over after the encounter. While this makes a lot of sense, we may never know if these dogs really exist, or are just the mind playing tricks on the exhausted. Although I did just make a 15-minute video dedicated to phantom dog encounters. So, who knows? Moving on, we find a story from a truck driver in Australia who encountered something that he wasn't planning on. During a long trip from Sydney to Melbourne, this man started to feel tired and decided to stop at what he thought was the closest truck stop. When he arrived at his location, he found everything to be pitch black, with no streetlights, no other vehicles, nothing. Thinking nothing of it, he parked his truck, locked all the doors, turned off his lights, set the alarm for the morning, and laid down to get some well-deserved rest. Even though he was tired, he found it hard to sleep due to the temperatures outside being around 30 degrees Celsius, which is 86 degrees Fahrenheit. He tossed and turned in his bed, trying to get comfortable for at least 5 to 10 minutes. Realizing it was going to be hard to fall asleep, he finally laid on his back and stared off while going over the plans for his route the next day. Suddenly he heard the passenger door open up slightly and saw the dome light of the cab turn on. In this story he mentions that he kept his truck in good working order and knew that the locks worked like they should. He lay in his bed in silence, just waiting for someone to peer in on him. After quite a few minutes, nothing happened, and he didn't hear any other noises. Finally, he got the nerve up to grab his flashlight, which was called a torch, and check out what was going on. There was no one else in the cab, and he even was brave enough to leave his truck and do a sweep of the area around him. Finding nothing, he returned to the cab, relocked the doors, and managed to finally get to sleep. In the morning, he awoke hungry and planned to get something to eat at the truck stop. To his surprise, he found that he was actually parked at a cemetery. With thinking about the prior activity that night before, he decided to start up his truck and leave the area as soon as possible. This story actually came from a post wanting to hear about truckers' strange encounters, and it was submitted by a user by the name of -XR8 Turbo. What is interesting is that many of the replies to this story were under the impression that whatever opened the cab door wasn't trying to get in, but was actually something leaving. After reading this story, I couldn't even imagine laying in my bed for the night and hearing the door open and seeing the dome lights coming on. That would be a really terrifying experience, even if it was just a person causing mischief. But then to add to it that it's a ghost, no thank you. Our next story involves a really strange encounter from one of the areas that we recently visited in the Cryptid by State series. On May 7th of 2002, a man named Robert had just picked up a shipment of produce in Yuma, Arizona. He started his journey on Interstate 8, but soon he realized that he needed to make an emergency stop to relieve himself. According to the story, he pulled off of exit 140 at about 4:30 in the morning to make the pit stop. As he drove down the exit ramp, he saw a strange dark figure standing off the side of the road. Robert stopped his truck, but kept his eyes on the person that he saw. Oddly enough, he realized that this being was holding some type of carcass in his hands, but when he stopped the truck, it dropped it. The being stood there in silence, just staring at Robert for 4 to 5 seconds, before it started to walk towards his truck. At this point, Robert started to freak out a little bit, and made sure his doors were locked. The being then stopped walking about 2 feet from the driver's door. What was really odd was that the windows in the truck were about 7 feet above the road, but this being was tall enough to see inside. Inexplicably, Robert reached into a compartment to grab his camera, but just as he lifted it to take a picture, the being flashed a bright light at him. Although, at the same time, Robert managed to take a picture which blinded the creature. He claims that the creature stood there for a few seconds after being blinded, and just smiled at him. It then turned and walked away, during which was the first time that Robert finally got a good look of what this thing was. According to the pictures he drew, it appeared to be a reptilian being. He then claimed that this figure then walked up to a strange craft that suddenly became visible in a nearby parking lot and got in. As the craft took off, he said it was triangular and had 3 dull red marker lights in each of the points of the craft. Once it rose to 10 to 15 feet, it released an unknown red cloud and sped off into the sky. After a few minutes of sitting in disbelief as to what just happened, Robert grabbed a flashlight and decided to check out the carcass that had been dropped. He found that it was a deer, but the head was missing, as if it had been bitten off. Oddly enough, the fur around the neck appeared like it had been burned, and all the internal organs had been removed. The vacant cavity in the deer carcass appeared to have been burned as well. Robert left quickly, but mentioned that he had been through that same area many times in his career. He also stated that on a few occasions he did find other carcasses later on that same stretch of road that shared the same marks as his previous encounter. This story has a few puzzling things about it that sort of confuse me. such as, why did he stop the truck near someone staying on the road when his intent was to pee? Why did the reptilian walk to the truck and then simply walk away? Why was his first reaction to grab a camera when someone strange, who he just saw drop some unknown carcass up the road, approaches their vehicle, rather than grabbing a weapon of some sort? These are questions that I doubt I will find answers to, but even as such, they don't rule this story as fake. As odd as this tale is, Arizona is said to have a population of reptilian beings living in the area, so I assume anything is possible. Our final story is quite interesting, and one that has a feel of a tale being told over a campfire, but as far as I can tell, it is believed to be true. In June of 2011, Mike was driving in Palestine, Arkansas on his way to Houston, Texas. While driving on Interstate 40, he came across the truck stop and decided to take a break for the night. After eating some food, he climbed into his bed and laid down. Suddenly, he was awoke to the feeling of his truck being shook like it was in an earthquake. Mike assumed it was just the wind, but decided to check outside just in case it wasn't. Mike walked around the front of his truck to the passenger side and saw something move that was low to the ground. He reached into his cab and grabbed a flashlight and locked the door to make sure that no one tried to get in while he wasn't near the cab. At this point, he noticed what he thought was a girl standing in the field behind his truck. However, when he strained to get a better look, she vanished from sight. He walked to the back of the truck, scanning the field with his light, but couldn't find anyone or anything. Assuming it was a trick his mind was playing on him, he turned to walk back to the cab. It was then that he heard a girl giggling, and he immediately started to check under his truck. Mike said that after not finding anyone, he turned to go back to his truck and audibly muttered, "This is getting kind of creepy." To which he heard a girl's voice say, "He heard me." If that wasn't unsettling enough, he said the voice didn't come from the field, but sounded like it came from inside his still locked cab. He cautiously unlocked the door and peered into his truck when he heard the same voice say, "Good night." Mike started to search the truck but found no one was there. Then he looked out his windshield and he saw the same girl from the field standing outside his truck door. He said that the thing he noticed was that she looked fairly normal, other than the fact that she had what he called lifeless eyes. Quickly he put the keys in the ignition and started the truck. After waiting for all the systems to come up and for the alarms to go off so he could release the air brakes, he left the truck stop. As he looked into the rearview mirror, he saw the girl in the same spot, waving at him as he left. Mike said he felt the girl wasn't actually human and was able to take whatever form it wished. Going a step further, he said that he bought 2 items while at the truck stop: a cheap knife and a postcard showing a map of the area. After getting to safety, he found that the knife had been removed from its box and was now sticking in the postcard with the point at the exact location he saw the girl, and it was jammed into his end table. I can certainly say that I hope this story was just a fabrication, because if it isn't... Let's move on to the 3 comments I loved section. The first one comes from the Grim One, who said, "Glad to see you updating, just started following you and I love your style, and really your voice is so relaxing. It's the perfect way to unwind, cryptids and ghosts and coffee." Thank you, the Grim One. Let me first and foremost say, welcome to the Cryptid family. I am happy that you enjoy my content and style of presentation. Through the years I have found people either love my voice or they hate it. I always enjoy seeing people comparing it to some famous person. I frequently see comments saying I sound like Tom Hanks, Kevin Costner, or even Nicolas Cage. As far as my schedule, I try to upload something new every Monday, unless something in my life or work prevents it. The next one comes from Luke Klein, who said, "Good video, Ben. I'm glad to hear you're not quitting YouTube. Would not be the same without you." Wow. Thank you, Luke Klein. I'm still seeing comments from viewers being worried that I mentioned I thought about quitting. These messages really warm my heart, and I see it as quite obvious that if I did decide to leave, I would be hurting a lot of people. I promise to stay with you all until YouTube shuts me down. And last but not least, Stuart Meatball advised, "Get rid of the table and chairs. Just get them out of your house." Thank you, Stuart Meatball, for the advice. His comment was in relation to me mentioning that I think our second-hand table and chairs may have a spirit attached to them. My wife has made it well known that the new furniture isn't going anywhere. The thing is, our house has quite a few spirits hanging around at any given time, so ghosts really don't bother me anymore. In saying that, I will be making a video about what activity has come from a recent purchase. I honestly think the spirit is that of a child or a really shy spirit. I say that since activity never happens when we are downstairs. Only when everyone is upstairs does the spirit act up. If you haven't yet done so, do please consider subscribing to my channel for more content like this. Also, it would be greatly appreciated if you share my videos with someone you know who may be interested in this type of genre. With that, be safe, and I'll see you in the next one. Later!